Welcome to the Property Elite podcast. I'll be your host, Jen Lehman, chartered surveyor and co-founder of Property Elite. Stay tuned each week for more on industry hot topics, market updates and new RICS guidance.
Hello everyone, I'm Abigail from Property Elite and I'm here with Katie and Karl to talk about kind of matters relating to social value and in particular to how we advance equality, diversity and inclusion in the built environment. So hopefully this is going to be a fairly free-flowing conversation. So it would be brilliant to start with some introductions. Katie, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Of course, and thank you so much for inviting us on as well. So I'm Katie Corbett. I'm a social value and EDI manager at Bray & Slaughter. So it's a SME construction management company that's been operating in Bristol for about 125 years now. And I started in the company in about March time, and that was when my role was created. And it was to further strengthen our social value offering and enhance that and lead on our strategy across projects. And then alongside my day job, I also am the EDI champion for Women in Property Southwest. So I'm on the committee for that. So I'm involved in organising EDI-related events and also just networking with loads of others in the industry who are like-minded.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I have so many questions already, but I will save them. Karl, do you want to do an intro?
Yes. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on this platform. And my name is Karl Brown, and I'm a commercial property partner at national law firm Clark Wilmot. And I act for developers in buying and selling development land. Alongside my day job, I've always been very passionate about trying to improve social mobility and also equality, diversity and inclusion within the business world and in our professions. So in 2019, I founded an initiative called the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter to aim to boost diversity and inclusion in the Bristol property sector. And it started with 16 founder companies and organisations as signatories. And it's now got just over 115 companies and organisations as signatories. And then in addition to that, I'm a social mobility ambassador for the Law Society of England and Wales. And I'm also the chair of Clark Wilmot's ED&I committee.
I have even more questions. Amazing. Although, in fact, I, through sheer coincidence, came across the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter last week for the first time. So I, just as kind of a brief run through of my background, I work at Bailey Partnership as my day job, and I'm a Property Elite consultant in the little free time that I have. I head up our Chichester office and our South Coast project management team, and I'm also the chair of our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Committee across the company. And one of our social value lead in our Bristol office actually sent it to our internal chat last week saying, "This is an amazing document, shall we sign up? And why does every city not have one of these?" And I was like, that's a good question. So there you go. That's your kind of, that's amazing that it's spreading so far. Like, phenomenal work.
Please do sign up.
Yeah, it's, I mean, it's absolutely fantastic. And this stuff is obviously so phenomenally important. And something we were discussing in the same conversation is the fact that a lot of professional bodies have particular inclusion charters as well. So it's interesting looking at how all of the different goals of them kind of overlap and intersect. But brilliant. Katie, from your side, what was it that kind of first drew you to focus on social value kind of alongside your professional practice? Oh, we have lost Katie. Cool. While she is waiting to join, in that case, I'm really interested to hear more about that social mobility ambassador role that you do. What does that look like?
Well, my social mobility ambassador role for the Law Society really involves, in the main, going into local schools and trying to and giving careers talks and careers advice to local students. And this strategy that I normally use is just to try to give a narrative of my own personal journey into law. So I'm the son of immigrants from Jamaica, and I'm Bristol born and bred. And I went to school locally in Downing School, secondary comprehensive school, and I didn't have any connections whatsoever to professions such as law. And then after I managed to get into university and started studying for a law degree, I made applications to try and get what was then known as a trainee solicitor position, and I didn't have any luck at all. And I continued making applications after I'd finished my law degree. And then it was only after over 100 applications that I finally got that magic training contract. And so, what I really try to emphasize when I'm going into schools is my own personal journey as a son of immigrants who went to a state comprehensive school, no connections at all to the legal profession. I found it very difficult to break into the legal profession, and just really sort of outlining that lessons I learned, and also that if someone from my background can do it, then that those students who I'm speaking to can also do it as well. So yeah, I'd say that's my main role. And then beyond that, I also have featured in articles as well in various publications, and I've also spoken at various careers events and careers fairs as well. So yeah, I mean, it's a role I absolutely love, and I'm a role that I'm very passionate about doing.
Oh, it like that absolutely comes across, and that whole kind of piece of representation is so incredibly important. I think there's this idea of the construction industry here that you have to be kind of from a certain background, or perhaps have grown up around construction, or have kind of family who are from the UK, or kind of certain characteristics in order to kind of be successful in this industry, and perhaps property even more so than construction in a way, and just showing that people from all different backgrounds, walks of life could be successful, I think is so important for just for kind of that visibility for other people to actually see, like that could be me. Like, if I want to do that, cool, they can. Why can't I? So I think that's amazingly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, the phrase that I think I got from when we were in lockdown, and also which I heard often after the tragic killing of George Floyd in 2020, was this phrase of "you cannot be what you cannot see," and it really resonated with me because I think if you're from an underrepresented background, or if you're from a background which doesn't have any links with a particular sector such as property or the law, then sometimes it can be really difficult to actually visualize yourself as having a place in that industry or sector, and being able to succeed in it.
Yeah. Like I think that's so incredibly important. And when I was growing up and looking at what careers I was going to could sort of potentially do, I never saw women working in the construction industry. Certainly not at the level I've ended up at. Certainly not. I'm also not from a kind of British heritage. I would, it's kind of almost sheer luck and willpower that I've ended up in this career. I didn't think it would be a job for people like me. And so it's so amazing for people kind of coming into this industry to be able to see. Amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how, like, your kind of view of social value, I guess, is like so incredibly broad because you're so involved in so many different aspects. But for you, how would you define what social value looks like in the context of the built environment generally?
I think social value in the context of the built environment, it involves sort of a multitude of a few things. So I think it's first of all trying to provide proper connection and representation to the local communities which the built environment is trying to serve and trying to provide for. And I actually think that there's a massive gap in terms of design work in the built environment. And I've often joked to myself that if I actually had the necessary design technical skills, then I'd actually set up some type of firm which actually specializes in advising construction companies when they're or house builders when they're actually doing their developments on the types of designs and factors which can make their developments more inclusive, because I think that's often something which can get overlooked, that when these developments are being designed, the question you also have to ask yourself is, does it take into account some of the local community characteristics, which can vary from area to area? And then I think the other part of social value, which I think is important, is not just a customer facing base, but also the recruitment base as well. And that's really making sure that the property industry is open up to persons from all backgrounds who have the right talent, right work ethic, and the right attitude as well. And I think that's a critical part. And actually, they go hand in hand. So if you sort of succeed in that second point of recruiting that diverse base, then it will help you in that first point I was making about trying to make sure that you properly provide service to your broad customer base.
Yeah, I think so as well. It's something that, like, the built environment and property industry is something that is, we are ultimately developing spaces which wider communities are going to use. And so the way I see it, we have a duty to kind of not only make sure our own organizations are diverse for kind of the benefit of the society and the people in the companies, but also because we then need to design and develop spaces which represent the broader communities. And how can people have the kind of lived experience to develop those spaces and really understand those user groups, if it's user groups that no one in the project team has kind of interacted with or is from? I think it's really, really important. Katie, you're back in.
Yes, I've been here this whole time, but you've not been able to see or hear me, I don't think.
It's really bizarre. It was kind of doing the, I'll just do a little pause. So, Katie, I'd love to hear a bit more about kind of what it was that first drew you to focus on social value and inclusion in your practice, because it sounds like you've almost kind of linked several things together in how you deliver work.
Yeah, I do find that social value and EDI work are very transferable and overlap in so many different aspects. I first found my way into this industry through an administration job when I was doing a sociology degree in equality and human rights. And I found that after I'd finished my dissertation, it was an incredible industry that had so much, so many positive things going on in terms of ED&I and organisations and people that are doing incredible things, but it doesn't reflect the rich diversity of Bristol. And in my previous role as a diversity and inclusion manager in an engineering company, and then I've transferred into a social value role now, which is very similar, but so much more engaging with communities around our projects, with schools, the local councils and community groups as well. So it's been really fantastic and rewarding work to get into.
Amazing. What an awesome background. So we were just talking a little bit about how construction projects, how property projects and design can actually kind of meaningfully create social value for communities. I'd be really interested to hear from kind of both of you or either of you about how you might actually, in your experience, measure or like evidence the impact that it has.
Do you want to go first, Katie, or I don't mind?
Yeah, I can. So I tend to use the Tom's National Framework for Social Value Tracking, and most local authorities use this as well. So using it across all projects enables us to measure our social impact, also have a benchmark and compare how we're doing against national targets or internal targets. And I've also, because we are an SME and we don't necessarily have a subscription to different platforms that will track it for us. We've got our own bespoke one that we use internally that calculates it for us. But in terms of showing the evidence of it, I find storytelling to be the best way, just putting together photos, a description of what we've done, who was involved, and specifically who it's benefited, and feedback from them as well. I find that really brings the impact to life for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And that storytelling piece is so incredibly important. It becomes so much more than just numbers on a page. It kind of becomes that, people can relate to it and really understand the impact that we're having on people's lives, understand that this is an industry that we can, everyone can get involved in, because you start seeing people from different walks of life kind of being involved and so on. Karl, from your side, what do you see as being kind of the biggest opportunities for innovation when it comes to social value across the project lifecycle? Where do you think the big wins can be?
I think the big wins can be in terms of a project, and I'm slightly stepping outside my field as a humble lawyer, but I'd go back to the summary I mentioned about design, and making sure that the design of the relevant building or development can really take into account all local needs. And I think where the innovation will be just how you actually make sure that you get feedback from all of those different communities, because although those communities may not be geographically that far from where the building or development is going to be constructed, sometimes actually trying to get full engagement from those communities or know where to go in terms of getting proper feedback from those communities can be far more difficult. So I think the sort of real innovation is just trying to figure out ways and to speak with intermediaries who actually have those contacts with those local communities to enable them to provide full feedback. And then I think the other innovation, which I know that a lot of construction companies already do, and there's often requirements from local authorities as well when it comes to this, is in terms of the procurement, and it's trying to ensure that particularly on these large developments of buildings or large scale developments full stop, that there's, where possible, a variety or diversity of procurement to make sure again that the local community or those in the local communities who can perhaps take part in supply chains have a proper opportunity to sort of provide their goods or services and to actually benefit in terms of their business. And again, I think that's something which I know is in place, but I think needs further innovation to make sure that local communities actually benefit, not just in terms of the designs, but also in terms of their local businesses.
100%. And that's actually something increasingly I'm seeing from the kind of clients who send projects to us for tender, in that they are asking for, how close does your project team live to the site? What is the proximity? And that for me is almost like a demonstration of three things, because it's firstly, social value in a huge way includes sustainability measures. So it ends up becoming a measure of like, are your team tracking halfway across the country? Secondly, it is a way to make sure that through the procurement process, your team actually has an understanding of the local area and the specific kind of the diversity of people, mix of issues that they face, the current kind of any embedded like inequality issues and so on. And it also supports local hiring and kind of building up companies and teams in the areas that are near particular project sites, which is always going to be a wonderful thing.
Yes, and I think also I've spoken in local communities, frequently, and sometimes, perhaps with justification or not, there has been a degree of cynicism when it comes to new developments or new buildings close to where those communities are being constructed, because in the past, I think it's fair to say that those local communities haven't benefited economically or felt that they've actually had a proper look in to potential opportunities to benefit economically. And so I think if you can demonstrate that there's a open, transparent pathway for those local communities to also be part of the procurement chain, then that will also help really engender better buy-in from those local communities that this is a project or development or building which isn't just geographically close, but actually metaphorically far, far away, but it's actually something which they can really fully engage with and feel can be, will serve and be part of their local area.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's so incredibly important. Katie, from your side, I'd be interested to hear about, obviously you're very involved in Shared Women in Property Southwest, which I actually think quite a few people from our Plymouth office are really involved in. So I'd be really interested to hear from your side, like the built environment has really historically struggled with diversity. Like there's many kind of different protected characteristics, kind of women being one of them, that are very heavily underrepresented in the industry. But like, I'd be really interested to hear from your side about what positive changes you have seen.
Yeah, so I actually went to school in Plymouth, and it was an all-girls school, and my university degree was then a 50-50 split, and then my postgraduate was probably about almost 100% women in the room. So I was never expecting to come into the property and construction industry, but when I did, I was quite, I guess not surprised, but I found it very strange to then not be surrounded by a mixture of different people. So there are some incredible organisations like the Inclusion Charter and individuals and businesses in Bristol who have been looking at the recruitment and retention for diversifying the industry and making it more inclusive for years. And I've only been in the industry for about 3.5 years. But I am noticing such a positive and collaborative approach that we've still got so much more to do, but there's an increasing amount of different organisations and people working together to really try and make the industry more of a welcoming and opening place for people.
Yeah, absolutely. Karl, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on we touched a little bit on the kind of recruitment side earlier, because it's, one of the larger criticisms is that the industry seems to become successively less diverse the more senior you get. Like there are successively, it tapers, I suppose, is the most fair way to say it. But ultimately, there is a diversity problem kind of across the industry as a whole. And it's very difficult to hire people of certain characteristics into professional positions if you just don't have much diversity in the company to start with. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on how you feel that from the kind of get-go, it might be possible to improve recruitment in the industry.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of issues. I mean, first of all, in relation to recruitment, it's trying to make sure, and this is part of the thing that I try to ensure through the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter, that young people or even mature people who are looking for a change of career are fully aware of the range of roles that there are in the property industry. I mean, I often say that if you'd asked 14-year-old me, what does a career in property involve? I'd have just come up with two answers. One, working on a building site because my dad was a plasterer, or the other being a high street estate agent, only because I saw high street estate agents when I was trailing after my mum and dad when they were going shopping. So I didn't have any idea whatsoever about the range of careers that there are in the property industry. And so I think that's definitely one element, making sure that potential recruits are aware of those opportunities. And then once they're aware, that will generate further interest and possibly, further applications. And then alongside that, in terms of recruitment, there's some of the more widely spoken about points, such as making sure that the recruitment process itself is fair. Where possible, you've got a range of interviewers, that in terms, there's different techniques. So some companies adopt name blind CVs. Other companies may adopt what's called contextualized recruitment, which is essentially that if you've got two candidates, one candidate who's from a fairly wealthy area, the other candidate from a substantially less wealthy area, and that second candidate has only got slightly lower academic qualifications, then contextualized recruitment is that you take into account that second candidate's context, or in terms of their upbringing, their area.
I have to say, I've never heard that term before, and I absolutely love it. It's always something I try to kind of explain without that term inside our own organisation. And I'm definitely going to be using that term. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then I think the other side of the coin, as it were, which I think is really important and which I often speak about, is that industries such as property or even professions such as law have gotten better in terms of the range of people in their recruitment, but where the real challenge is in terms of retention and progression. And in some ways, there's not much value if you're having that greater success in recruitment, but then losing all of those broad range of recruits in 1 or 2 years. And that really then leads to what you were mentioning at the start of the question, which was the fact that at senior levels, you don't have that diversity that you'd perhaps wish and hope for.
No, and in my own experience, I think a lot of that is that just people not having an understanding of the type of diversity that we have and need. Like I once had one of my more bizarre instances in construction. Someone once said to me with a really straight face, "I don't really understand how, why so many women seem to leave the industry after they're in the 30s. Like, have you maybe thought about the fact that as an industry, we really don't kind of offer, world-leading maternity and paternity pay? It's often very inflexible. A lot of companies kind of haven't fully embraced the opportunities for flexible working." But they genuinely didn't they were saying this to me in all honesty, they didn't have an understanding of why it is that people of a certain group often don't stay in the industry. So it seems to me that there is a really big piece of just very gentle education needed.
Yeah. I think as well, there's also such an upsetting statistic of the amount of parents who find themselves in their 30s then coming off of maternity or paternity leave, and they're going into entry-level jobs again because that is more flexible and suited to their needs, whereas they've got 10 years experience behind them and they're having to take that pay cut.
Yeah, completely. I was really fortunate actually that I joined my current job, which is a consultancy Bailey partnership, on the back of my maternity leave. So I was incredibly fortunate to find a company that were like, "Yep, you're new to this area, you're coming off the back of maternity leave, you only want to work 4 days a week. We absolutely want to hire you because you've proven experience." And so it is reassuring that there are companies out there who aren't going to kind of go, we need someone who's going to be available at all times and able to work full time and have that kind of commitment. But it really is such a challenge for so many people. Cool. I mean, we've talked a huge amount about kind of different challenges to embedding social value and diversity, equality, equity, and so on across the industry. Katie, from your side, are there any particular myths or misconceptions about EDI or DEI? Out of interest, do both of you either of you prefer the term DEI or EDI?
I think I'm used to EDI because I think that's how it was first coined and used. And then when it's kind of swapped around, I get a bit muddled sometimes. But yeah, I normally say EDI.
I also normally say ED&I as well. But I mean, I guess that's, actually been one of the issues that there has been in this particular sector, that there's been a lot of different terminologies and ways people use some of these acronyms, and sometimes it does confuse persons who aren't actually sort of closely involved in this type of work. So they use it differently in America, and even with ED&I, I know in America sometimes they refer to it as equity, diversity, and inclusion, and then at other times, say in this country, we refer to it as equality, diversity, and inclusion. So I mean, there's been issues about acronyms and terminology, but I think, to be fair, we all know what the substance of the work is, don't we?
Yeah, I think so. I ended up in like a half-hour, very deep dive conversation with our head of HR about which term we wanted to use on our manifesto. And we so I'd been advised by HR somewhere else that the order of the words implies kind of the relative priorities. So that under DEI, it's like, well, you have to have diversity before you can have a form of kind of equality. And then ultimately the thing you need to strive towards at the end is then that inclusion. Once you've got your diversity sorted, you've got your equality sorted. But in the end, we concluded we were going to go with EDI because that's kind of the original one we felt a lot of people knew. Sorry, carry on.
I've also seen that people have, and I have done it before in a report, is tag on the word belonging at the end, because it is so important to have those three things. But at the same time, everyone needs to feel that they belong and that they're comfortable in that workplace as well.
So much. I was on a panel talk at the Kent Construction Expo a couple of weeks ago about equality and diversity in industry. And one of the biggest things we ended up talking about was like that psychological safety that's so important for kind of people to have. And it's very, it's really like intangible. It's kind of the least on paper thing. And I keep saying to our managing director and to HR, like, we're striving to build this psychological safety. And we haven't quite defined it yet as an organization. But we're finding, for example, that every time we send out an anonymous inclusion questionnaire or a questionnaire to kind of gather information about people's protected characteristics so that we can have an understanding of, are we moving in the right direction as a business? We're having more and more people answer questions each time, as opposed to people who are putting would rather not say. So for me, things like that are the biggest measure of like, are we building that sense of belonging? Are we building that psychological safety? Like, are people comfortable talking about these things? Are people comfortable kind of, feeling psychologically safe enough to feel that they belong somewhere and that they can really kind of be themselves and talk about who they are? And I do think that's incredibly important.
Yeah, and I think also, just going back to your previous point about some of the misconceptions, I think one of the big challenges for people working in this sector or working in this field or trying to promote the values of ED&I is trying to reassure the wider workforce or wider public that it's not a zero-sum game. I mean, I think part of the, shall I say, headwinds that have been facing the ED&I work and sector in this country and perhaps in the across the Atlantic as well recently has been to do with the fact that sometimes it's been seen as almost as a winners and losers type of activity, when in actual fact it's just trying to create the right conditions for all people to thrive, regardless of their background, characteristics, etc. And so I think the big challenge is just trying to convey that it's not trying to put one section of the population up on one level and take down or keep down another section of the population or characteristics or groups or religions, etc. It's just trying to create an environment where anybody, regardless of their background, etc., can thrive. And I think that's the key message. And if you can get that message across, then I think actually when you're doing this within a company or organization, that's probably possibly even 3/4 of a battle.
I think that's so incredibly important, isn't it? Not seeing it as a zero-sum game. Ultimately, it's just we need to better represent and support our society. Like, the messaging is at its core really, really simple. Like, the overall kind of the drive is kind of it's just towards something that is more equitable than we have at the moment. I'm going to move on to some final questions. I'm a little bit conscious of time. Probably a question, Katie, I'll do this question for you. How do you feel that kind of collaboration between different sectors, so public sector, private sector, communities, education institutions, can help to accelerate progress towards, I don't know which word to use, equity, we'll run with?
Yeah. So collaboration is, it's probably a word I'll use daily, or when it comes to talking about EDI and diversifying our city. There's been some incredible events and initiatives that I've been part of, and the biggest impact I find is when multiple people come together. A great example of that, and I'm not sure if you spoke about it earlier, Karl, is the Orchard School, UE, BPAA, Bristol Property Inclusion Charter collaboration, where a call out went amongst your members, in which I was able to come and take part in. But it was able to represent so many different diverse skill sets within the industry and different careers that students wouldn't normally consider or to know about, and to do a careers day with them and almost give them a little day in the life and a project of what it is like to be in our industry. And the feeling of coming away from an event like that, you can really see the impact it's had. And that's all been made possible because there have been, I guess maybe about 15 different organisations involved. So it's, I sometimes there's a level of almost competitiveness or gatekeeping, and people aren't sharing resources, but there's such an abundance of different companies and organisations that are sharing their resources, and we're all collaborating towards the same goal, really.
Yeah, and just to follow up on Katie's comment there, and useful example, I mean, one of the things that I definitely try to promote through the Bristol Property Inclusion Charter is collaboration. And I'm really grateful that, up till now and over the years, we've had great support and collaboration from local major property organisations such as Women in Property Southwest, Bristol Property Agents Association, FBE, Great Western Branch, as well as the individual employers and organisations. And I often say that if you've got an industry-wide issue or problem, such as trying to boost the diverse intake and retention into an industry, then it requires an industry-wide solution. And yes, we've all got our own individual business interests, and employers will have their own commercial interests. But in this particular area, I really do think that you can actually work in a collaborative way. And one of the things that I've really been heartened about is that that's showing not just in the property sector, but even in my sort of day job area of the legal sector as well. A lot of big local law firms in Bristol are working together to try and really sort of make improvements in this area.
Amazing. So what is that looking like in practice?
Yeah, I mean, in practice, it's just trying to, for example, work together on events such as the one Katie mentioned. It's also trying to, I think, knowledge share. And again, it comes back to this point that, yes, we've all got our own business interests, but if there's good practice or things that are working, within one or two employers, which are really bearing fruit in terms of the range of recruits or retention, then it's that willingness to be open and say to other businesses or organizations, you might want to, for example, consider this as part of a way that you're operating your business. So I'd say it's not only collaborating on particular events, but it's also knowledge sharing, so that we can all improve our best practices and procedures and sort of really provide potential recruits with a complete industry solution or offer in terms of where they might want to work.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly put. Yeah, completely. Amazing. Thank you both so much for your time and talking to me. This has been absolutely amazing. Is there anything else that either of you would like to add before we close off?
No, I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to speak, and I think always, a good sign is that time flies by, doesn't it, when you're in these type of discussions?
I know completely. I mean, I could talk about these kind of things all day. Yeah. A significant part of my day job does end up involving talking about these things, which is really lucky.
Thanks for listening to the Property Elite podcast this week. Head to our website to check out our full blog, free and paid support resources and services, free consultation for every single RICS APC and AssocRICS candidate, and also ask us any questions you have via the website chat blog. See you next week.